I wanted to throw this as a background to give you an idea that we're not just talking about the 54 countries. We're talking about the greater African family, the diaspora engaging. And I'd like to start it off with pretty much a 2-3 minute presentation from each of our participants of what their initial views are, that we can have a flavor of how the discussion will begin to direct itself. So, Mr. President, if you have some opening comments on this particular August subject matter, especially so because you were there not only in Senegal, which is a large country, Francophone country, and deals with a unique aspect in terms of national geopolitics, because it's got Gambia situated right in the center. So Senegal encompasses all Gambia. Senegal is known as one of the cultural epicenters of West Africa. But you also had a view of post-Arab Spring in Tunisia. So you also had an insight. How would you marry those experiences with this particular thing of strengthening future international relationships with Africa and the external family, Mr. President?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'm very happy to be here in this conference, and it's congratulations for Mark to choose this title, Rise of Africa, because particular Rise of Africa is for me a dream. And I want to explain this for me. A part of my life, an important part of my life, was under dictatorship regime, very cruel dictatorship regime, the communist regime during Ceausescu type in Romania. It was a criminal dictatorship regime. And my country, was like a prison. But I received in university many African students. And this African student represented, in that time, freedom for Romania, because the students was more free like Romanian in that time. And we keep this, we keep relation. And many students, I'm professor of geology, and many students from Africa, different countries of Africa, choose to study geology because it was important to have specialists for exploitation of the big mineral resources of Africa. But, and I'm very proud, my former students in graduate, in master, and PhD, now is an important position in Africa. When I was in Senegal, the Minister of Resources was my students. And also in Tunisia, especially in Egypt, in many other, in Algeria, studied in Romanian universities. And this is important, a part work now in Africa, a part work in Europe and the United States. This diaspora is extremely important for development on African countries. And I want to share with you experience of countries from Central, Southeastern Europe. Was the same at the end of 19th centuries and beginning of 20th century. Many Romanians, but also Hungarians, Czech, Slovak, Bulgarians, Polish, etc., studies in French and in Germany. A part remaining in elite in French, in Germany, in Great Britain, but most important part come back in Romania. And their contribution of the development of independence of the country and development of country and finally for fighting for democratic system. But I want to come back of this idea of freedom. The highest degree of freedom is solidarity. And in my opinion, this is difficult, but it's extremely important to obtain this solidarity. Solidarity not only against. It's important solidarity against against the dictatorship, for independence. But it's most important what happened after independence, after liberty. It's a new kind of solidarity we need. Solidarity focused on the project. And this is especially important for young generation to build their future. And now is a big energy in Africa. And like you said before, this energy of Africa was a very important contribution. And the United States and Brazil and and many countries, including European. And now, Rise of Africa is not only objective for Africans, but is a very important objective for all intellectual elite throughout the world. And I insisted on the role of intellectual elite, because without a program, without a project, sustainable project, it's not possible for people to build a real sustainable development. It's not easy, but I'm confident in capacity of actual intellectual elite for Africans in diaspora or in our countries to realize this project for sustainable development of all African countries and Africa in general.
Thank you very much. Very, very, very salient opening remarks. Now I'd like to go to, again, the ICD Director of Programs of African Affairs, Florence Tatu Amimu, for your opening comments, perspectives on the role of the diaspora in strengthening the future international relationships with Africa and the rise of Africa.
Thank you so much. I think my remark for this is the African diaspora should continue involving in whatever is happening in Africa for solidarity, to continue working together for the better of our mother country and our mother continent, that is Africa. Together we continue making a big difference that we have in Africa today, and we still need them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll jump Phiöip for a moment. So Phiöip, I'll give you just about another 3 minutes, because I know you have a lot of impact in this. We had a brief discussion yesterday, very brief. But I'll come over to Nermin. Is that the correct pronunciation? Nermin, what are your views in regards to this subject matter? And again, I know that, from which country are you from?
Egypt.
I know Egypt also does have a diaspora stretching all the way back to Alexandria, the burning of the Great Alexandrian Library. I hear it took 6 months to burn all the intellectual resources in that library alone. Can you imagine 6 months to burn the intellectual resources and the writings in Egypt alone? Egypt was not only phenomenal for its great architectural prowess, but even medically, classical Egypt had, just for the eye operation, it's got 200 documented procedures just for operating on the eye alone. That lost intellectual resource. So contemporary, again, I know you're over here. Could you share some views and perspectives coming from that Egyptian classical experience, its current experience, and as the diaspora, its future plasticity?
Is it working? Okay. Well, I don't think it's just Egypt, but I think it's all the other countries. And as a student here at the ICD, I see like this every day, people from all around the world trying to create something, trying to learn about others, trying to improve in their own field and in their country. And this is the start. Like, I think education is the most important thing to actually develop in any field and improve not only in the country that you're currently at, but also back home in your country. And this is how we could impact international relations and other projects in other countries as well.
Thank you very much. And Phiöip, Nigeria. Nigeria is known in some soft conversations as one of the economic engines of Africa. Nigeria pretty much is the sixth, or used to be the sixth largest producing oil country in the world. It produces oil, which is one of the finest in the world, needs very little refining. 3.2 million barrels of oil per day at peak production. But right now, with the Niger Delta conflict, that literally has ebbed down a little. Again, also to say about Nigeria, very, very unique a country. Nigeria, prior to 1956, really supported its economy, not on oil, but a lot from agricultural produce, and was very dominant in agricultural produce. Finally, Nigeria is one of the African countries that did not just have nation states. Of the 190 million you see today, Nigeria is known to have 5 distinct empires existing in Nigeria with their own cultural institutions and manner of governance. So Nigeria today, from Lagos to Abuja to the Jos Plateau and down to Port Harcourt, is a unique cultural political scene. Could you give us something about the Nigerian diaspora? Because I would say even in the United Kingdom, the buying of the Gatwick Airport was from a Nigerian consortium. So they think people may say they're loud, but they're bold, they're audacious, and they don't take prisoners when they have the ambition. I would finally add that the supposed father of software computing in the world right now is a Nigerian.
On that point, you are quite correct. The supposed father of computer, the person who created the supercomputer, is a man called Phiöip, who's from the eastern part of Nigeria. He's from Nigeria originally, but he's been in the US for more than 2 decades or so. This was as far back as the 80s, 90s, thereabout. Then in terms of resources, yes, you are quite correct that before 1957, we were supported. The Ministry of our economy was mainly agriculture, but when oil was discovered in 1957 at a place called Oloibiri in Bayelsa State, we've been in mono-economic nation for even before independence. So, and which has really destroyed our economy per se. But right now, our current government is making steps to diversify our economy away from oil to other sources like agriculture, and so that's...
Well, thank you very much. So the role of the diaspora, just in case you always have felt that there's not an appropriate African image, we always should remember the outgoing Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, Obama, who comes from Kenya. He's part of this thing. He's part of the great diasporic experience. And also Dr. Martin Luther King, who fostered a lot of social change in America. In 1964 and starting in 1955, was also a son of African heritage who forged the nonviolent peace movement, which caused a lot of change and the normalizing of a social chasm there. We have other names, Alexander Pushkin from Russia, who was a great composer, and you can go on and on and on. But these are classical pasts, and classical past can only help so far. But the diaspora today has a great impact in what it's doing. And until we begin to speak about this, we won't know. So what is the role of any diaspora, anywhere in the world, in being able to strengthen that particular environment from which it comes from? Again, any of the panelists, if you can take this up. The role of any diaspora, and the diaspora means your local community that is not situated in your country. It's actually living outside your country, but their historical roots are locked back in your country. I'll start with you, Nermin.
Well, I think it's a role of also integration with the current country that you're in. It's more about taking the good things that you are able to absorb in that foreign country and try to see what your country is actually lacking and try to work from there. So, for example, yesterday we mentioned vulnerability of Africa. I don't think you can be vulnerable if you have knowledge, and to have knowledge you have to be properly educated. And this is what we're currently lacking in most of African countries. So in order to have another community in a different country, you need to represent your own country as well and try to show the place where you are currently living, what you really are and who you really are, what your country actually represents in a proper way, and also work again with what you lack in your country back home when you get there.
Mr. President, in 1972, the former president of Ghana, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, actually died in Romania of skin cancer, which was very unique because he chose Romania to come to rather than go anywhere else for his treatment. So I know you have a uniqueness in being able to have another African son who studied in the diaspora outside in the United Kingdom and the United States before he came back into Ghana in the early 50s and became part of the United Gold Coast Convention, which then won the first pre-independence elections. What has been the impact of you seeing the diaspora, because you've handled a lot, like you say, of foreign students, and their invigorated drive to go back to Africa, or maybe their lack of wanting to go back to their countries of origin because they feel, for instance, with all due respect, that Romania is a better alternative?
First of all, in my opinion, the key word for relation between diaspora and is a bridge, because it's important to play this role of bridge between our own country, native country, and adoptive country. Was a movie in television maybe 30, 40 years ago, American movie, Roots. And in this movie, American, Afro-American citizens rediscover the roots, because it's important to keep the roots. And our goal in cultural diplomacy, the key word for cultural diplomacy, understanding the others. This is when I promote the higher education cultural diplomacy, I said it's important to this principle, understanding the other, because each individual is more rich if keep identity and own countries and rediscover and finally play this role of the bridge between career in hosted countries and sentimental for his roots in native countries.
Florence, if I may ask, a lot of the breakaway from the colonial master came from the diaspora. And I know that over in Kenya you have a very notable writing by the former president of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta. And I think it's facing either Mount Kenyatta or something. I hear it's a classic. But a lot of them from the Pan-African Conference, which was over in the UK, and I think it's 1945. A lot of those who came back from the diaspora and changed the cultural traditional set of Africa, which had been locked into the mentality, and they came back, the Nkrumahs, the Patrice Lumumbas, the Julius Nyereres, the Jomo Kenyattas, and you can go on. The one over, there's another one, I forget, but it's all right for now. But a lot of them came back with ideas that, not that they disrespected the African tradition, but they were able to stretch the boundaries for liberation, that the African potential could go to another phase. Taking Kenya, two things. What has been the impact? Because I know now His Excellency is also another Kenyatta.
The son of the former.
Oh, he's the son of the former
the
one.
founding father.
Oh, okay. And so you have two shining stars. You've got the son of Jomo Kenyatta, and then you have the other cousin who's over in the United States in the White House, Obama, the son of another Kenyan. How has that impacted these two superstars in terms of, and I know that the son of the former Kenyatta would have traveled outside Kenya for some of his studies. I can already see by the way he carries himself, he's as much traditionally bred as internationally knowledgeable. How has this impacted in terms of bridging the diaspora into the internal makings of Kenya?
Okay, maybe to start with, my president, that's the president of Kenya, he was a student abroad in the UK. Maybe that's why you can see he still has both cultures. He's trying to merge between the two. Then that's why. And another thing, why also maybe he's the son of the founding father, because people were trying to connect him with the father and the few things they did. And then always people in Africa, there's a say, we say, the fruits don't fall far from the tree. Yeah, so I think that is why we have that. Okay, now we come back to the people during that time, the one who went abroad to school and then they came back to Africa. I think what they were trying to do, most of them did not use the cultural diplomacy. That's why there's a lot of confusion, because they did not bring that culture and bring this one, and they meet in the middle and they see how they can come up and bond. I think I should say, with all due respect, and I'm not going to withdraw this statement, that's what I'm saying, no. They brought some of them a lot of confusion, because I think, yes, they were trained there and they come back to Africa and they were trying to implement what they got from that culture into the African context. And I think that is why it brought a lot of confusion, a lot of issues here and there. Although as much as, yes, they had a good intention, according to them and few people, but people had, the moment you start come and try to implement what is not, maybe this is not my culture, I'm not used to this kind of, there are two things there. Either I feel like a bit suspicious, you understand? And in Africa, at that time, when they came, people were still maybe relating them with the colonial master. So they felt the colonial master had come back with an African skin. I don't know whether so I think that is why, but I feel that they had a good intention to bring this into Africa so that to make the continent and forge forward and come. But I think maybe the implementation in some of the ways these things were done, that's why it brought a lot of suspicions, and that's why it did not augur well, or did not work well. It did not blend well. Or we would have blended the African culture and the other culture, and then they put together so that they don't have, because most of them are having this like identity crisis anyway. As much as they're black, but already they had left the other culture, and then here there's another culture. So I think that is my opinion to that.
Thank you, Phiöip. Back to Nigeria, a very traumatic nationhood. I know even in Europe, the question about nation states is still being discussed today, especially with the European Union and the borderless things. And pretty much as the traditional nation states were Germany, France, that's being merged or melted away. Nigeria had a uniqueness in regards to the way it was formed as a former colony of Britain under Lord Lugard. And he was the first who classically used the geopolitical instrument of divide and rule, or indirect rule, where he used one against the other. Nonetheless, you see Nigeria coming out of that over the last maybe 120 years and counting. And you see Nigeria actually taking strides, not only in entertainment, because Nigeria has formed an entertainment industry which actually competes with Hollywood, Bollywood, and if you just didn't know, there's another one in Ghana called Gollywood. Nigeria has Nollywood, which produces rapidly. The amount of film output they produce is, if I can stretch the English language, humongous. But not only that, I just saw a documentary in the United Kingdom of, and Mr. President, I know this would amaze a whole lot of people, that they also have a social profile in the United Kingdom called the Millionaires Club. And these are Nigerians who really are on the cutting edge of business, finance, and sophisticated high cultural tastes. And I'm saying it in its constructiveness. These are not fraudsters. These are people who've worked hard and have been able to achieve a lot. How does the coming back of those mindsets, again, add also even the music industry? This is just a short or a brief expose of the Nigerian diaspora and the indigenous Nigerian. What is the cultural synthesis? Since Florence has said there was in the return a slight cultural disruptive assimilation, not so volatile. What is the Nigerian impact? Because I know many of them have actually scaled really lofty and dizzying heights in intellectual, cultural, economic, and social accomplishments. The Igbos, brilliant businessmen. The Northerners in Sokoto, fantastic in their religious discipline, but also agricultural, etc. And the Yorubas, intellectual par excellence. In fact, they do say in South Africa, for every 4 Nigerian graduates, 1 is a PhD. How do you relate this great experience, and you now are in voluntary diaspora, to being able to strengthen future relationships in Nigeria and then over into Africa?
Of the Nigerian diaspora, why it's important for them to go back home is for the diaspora to use what they've learned abroad to develop their homeland. So they shouldn't just reap the benefits of development alone and just remain in their adopted country. They should also go back home to their homeland and look for ways of developing their homeland as a whole. In terms of the products that we have back home in Nigeria, it's true that we have a lot of Nigerians who have gone abroad and achieved great feats, nonetheless, in music, entertainment, economics, and what have you. We have some Nigerian artists in the US, UK, and so it's important for them to actually go back home to look for ways at which the various sectors of the social life can be developed and,
Thank you. Okay, we'll be getting ready to come now to the great, dynamic, and highly intellectual participants. Just give me a moment. Hold your fire. It's going to come. I'm going to give them 1 more minute to now just touch on. We've spoken and tried to unpackage the diaspora and give a picture of what kind of diaspora we're speaking about because of the stereotypical view of continental Africa. So that's what we've tried to do in the 2 presentations. Now, what I'd like my panelists to do is now talk about future international relationships with Africa and the rise of Africa. Again, starting with Nermin. How do you feel that the diaspora is able to assist in the future, no longer national, but international relationships with Africa? And also, how would they be a catalyst towards the former president, Doctor, said, to the rise of Africa. It's one thing just impacting in international relationships, but how would they be able to accelerate or be a catalyst towards a rise of Africa?
I'll give a brief example on what's happening today with relation to Egypt. For example, Mohamed El-Arian, if you know of him, he was the president of The Economist, and he is currently the advisor of President Obama. He's Egyptian. Whilst in Egypt there is a crisis about the Egyptian pound, and the central bank governor is really using monetary and fiscal policies to try to sort out the import crises in Egypt. So this is a pure example of how you could bring this expertise from abroad, and also with the knowledge of the internal conflicts of your country, and try to find a solution. And this, on a broader scale, could work with all other sorts of problems, whether it's financial, trade, educational. You bring different backgrounds and different fields of expertise and try to solve and integrate other countries in order to move forward and create the rise of Africa, I think.
Mr. President, I know in Romania you do have a very vibrant and dynamic diaspora all over. I mean, even in institutions just like unto yourself, and even a younger generation. But again, we keep going back to your experience, not only in Romania, but also on the continent of Africa. What, from your purview as being a head of government, which is different, you see things differently. In fact, it is the expanded form of fatherhood, because the way you have to think and balance things for the stability of the constituents or the environment you're in is a little different. You've got a different toolkit. What in your purview do you see as significant in terms of those minds, whether you saw them in Tunisia, Senegal, or in Addis Ababa, that can affect the future international relationships and also become an impetus into what your dream is, the rise of Africa?
Thank you. Before answer of last question, let me a short comment before for the dialogue. Firstly, about the impact of African culture and African energy in American and European culture. First question is, what is original in American culture? Because American culture is European culture. In philosophy, in music, in art, is European. What is original? Original is jazz. What represented jazz? In all people who answer is, what is original? Original or American culture is jazz. But jazz represented a creation of black people in America, adopted by Americans, adopted by like a patrimony of the world patrimony. But it was the same in Europe. At the end of the beginning of 20th century, European art was fossilized. And in this moment, rediscover in abstract art, in modern art, rediscover African art. And was the moment of explosion of European art, keeping this energy of African art. It is important now for this bridge, talking this bridge, because in cultural diplomacy we talk about the role of culture representing identity, because don't exist, it is possible to talk about multiculturalism in the moment we lost identity, because multiculturalism represents keeping identity, changing experience between different identities. And states, nation states, was an explosion in Central Southeastern Europe at the beginning of the 20th century. Was formed nation states, was a moment of explosion in art, in culture, of energy, of creativity of these people. It's exactly in what happened in Africa. And now I'm very proud to be a member of the board of Alexandria Library. And now representatives of all countries of the world work to rebuild this Alexandria Library, because Alexandria Library represented a treasure of the world. But in that time, is a synthesis between old Egyptian art and culture, Greek culture, Roman culture, Copt Christianism, and sure Muslim culture. It's like a crusade. It's extremely important what happened now in Alexandria, because I recommend you by net, you have possibility to see this extraordinary experience of Alexandria Library. And one of the main project approved by the board of Alexandria Library was addressed to young generation. And is a young people, Egyptian people, travel on stopping in different places, representative culture. This culture, Egyptian culture, Greek culture, Roman culture, Muslim culture. But many people, I was very, very happy, between many Romanians by net, is before United States. The number of Romanians using internet to see what happened in Alexandria Library was extremely important. But, finally, talking about your last question.
In strengthening the future relationships, since you've seen both sides, you've seen those who studied in Romania, and you've also been on the continent to see the younger ones coming in the post-elections. We definitely will have diasporic interventions.
Exactly. And now, what is the current situation in Romania? After integration of Romania in European Union, 4 million people work and live in Germany, especially in Latin countries, in French, in Italy, in Spanish, but also in United Kingdom and Germany. But what happened? In each year, budget of Romania, in Romania coming using bank system between 4 and 5 billion euros from diaspora in the country. Why? Because this money is used to build houses, modern houses. And it is extremely important for poorest zone of Romania, this money, but more, the represented intention of the people working in the other countries of European Union come back. Because if use the money to build houses, is idea for them or for dissidents of this family to come back. And now was extremely important in last election. In last presidential election, diaspora decide the president of Romania, because was two candidates, one win in the country, but using the vote of diaspora, actual president was elected by responsibility of diaspora for the political future of my country.
Thank you very much. Florence, again, dovetailing from your presentation yesterday, international relationships is one that is pretty much your home ground. You have done a whole lot of things and you don't shy away nor have an inferiority in international relationships. Definitely you're with the ICD right now, so the rise of Africa is one of your babies. I mean, I know your family is rapidly expanding intellectually. But what role now do you see with those you interface with in terms of they being able to give another image, but also another skill base in the international perspectives in Africa, and also have that stimulus which would have a tangible result of the rise of Africa from where it is?
To my opinion, I think Africa is changed now. We have a lot of development. There's so much going on in Africa. And I think it's a responsibility of the diaspora to present the image the way it is about Africa, with all the good changes that we have. So that one, I think it will be able to see, to show exactly, and to get in touch actually with the current issues which are happening in Africa, be it investment or any other way, or democracy, all these things, so that we can be able to present the way the facts are. I think that is okay. Maybe I can give a small example on an investment issue. Kenya is a major grower of flowers in the world. But for one reason or the other, the flowers exported to Netherlands. And then Nigeria, who is in Africa, I think they are near to us than here, they buy flowers from Netherlands. So I was among the people who spearheaded this investment, and then during Jonathan Goodluck, the former president of Nigeria, I was the chair of that committee. And we sit down with the business people from Kenya and in Nigeria, including the president, and then we had a delegation in Kenya, then we went to Nigeria and we sat down. And now we are exporting our flowers direct to Nigeria. So I think this interrelationship, because even nobody can explain why, the reason why it has to go to Netherlands, then they go there, they buy, they take to Nigeria, of which. So I think these are the kind of issues we have to present them the way they are, so that people can know what is happening. These are the new issues, emerging issues, and actually Africa is on the growing part. Thank you.
And Phiöip, possibly in a minute, we'd like to bring the participants on just before the lunch break. International relationships and cultural diplomacy. So I know you're pretty much in the groove of future international relationships. How would yourself and some of your colleagues who you network with on Twitter and LinkedIn, I don't know whether you do Facebook, but how would you and your colleagues or peers be able to strengthen future international relationships with Africa with a view of causing a rise, not a demise of Africa?
It's good that in terms of relationships with Africa, the perception needs to be corrected that Africa is not just a single country, but a continent as a whole. And the fact that the West has been related with Africa is a good step. For example, let me use my own country, Nigeria. Right now, since our current government came into power last year, the West, especially the EU and the US, they've been relating with us, having a series of meetings with us on how, and they are happy of the progress we've made, especially in terms of ending, because right now my government is on a so-called corruption war, anti-corruption war, so they're happy with the progress that our government is making with that regards. And they are also cooperating with Nigeria in other areas of development, which they need development. So not only Nigeria as a whole, but most Africa as a whole, they've enjoyed a steady relationship with the West over the years. And in terms of the diaspora, yeah, I and my colleagues would like to, look for ways of giving back to our various nations. That's all I can say. Just to give back.
Well, I'd like to thank the panelists. In fairness to the way time goes, and I was getting ready for lunchtime, which if I did take a vote, I know I would definitely be outnumbered, because you've done very well. You've really surprised me how you've sat so quiet and still and listened to all the engagement. But we are going to let you go to lunch. Otherwise, the president would say, we are not sustaining your freedom to eat and enjoy something which is really delicious in whatever manner you have it. We'll try to round this up in the next about 7 minutes. Unfortunately, we won't be able to come back to the panel. So we would like to thank the panel for their deliberations. But we'd like to take one or two. There's a gentleman over there who, Mr. President, is from Romania, and he really admires what you've done, and hopefully that one day he can walk in your shoes as the next president of Romania. So, Mr. President, just in case you see him, that may be the next president of Romania.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I did want to touch on this is very interesting, and actually it very much relates to me. So I was born in Romania, but I was adopted when I was 8 years old to America. And ever since I was a young kid, I've always wanted to go back to Romania. Anywhere I was, whether I was in Spain or France, and I've been to many countries, I tried to connect with other Romanians. And most of the time I always hear, especially in America, when I worked in Washington, D.C., people tell me, why would I want to go back? It's poor, it's corrupt, things like this. And I kind of saw two different roles. So I'm a very optimistic person. I want to go back. I obviously want your job, So I feel there is so much that I can offer. And hearing other Romanians, I do have something to say about Africa. I would say the diaspora works in two ways. It works in my way, and it works in the ways that the other Romanians. So in 1989, so many Romanians left. We dropped population by like 4 million, very drastic. But at the same time, these Romanians brought a different type of culture to the countries they visited. They sent money back, helping those Romanians who were too unable to progress financially. And it caused people like me to go to another country, to take what this other country offers, and to come back and bring that too. I do agree with you. There is a dilemma that arises. When I go back, am I going to, if I become a diplomat or the president, am I going to instill American values or Romanian values, or how do I manage with this? I've always pondered this myself, whether I'm really Romanian or if I'm American, I would say, like, Africans, I meet so many, I have so many Nigerian friends and people from West Africa who tell me they don't want to come back. But when I listen to their reasons, it does make sense. They don't want to go back to an area where their opportunities are limited. But at the same time, it's those people that Africa needs. It's people who want to and have the passion to rise, to progress, to have the energy to do something with their lives. It's those people that Africa needs, So people that can look outside their limitations and not care about the material wealth, I think it's very important. And the other thing, too, the other side of it is Haiti is so predominantly African. I mean, when we look at things like reggae and jazz, this is something that came from Afrobeat. Everybody talks about Afrobeat where I'm from. This is rap music. I mean, this is something that Africa has brought. You can't talk about people from Compton without thinking of all the things that they bring to American music. Music in America is I mean, think of all the Michael Jackson, even Elvis Presley, who used a lot of that. I think this is very important. This brings, France has this Francophone kind of organization. There is some kind of African thing that has really spread to South Africa, North Africa, you know, and I think this is really important. It brings them together, you know. I think at least half, if not more than half of the whole world is African, has been influenced by Africa.
Thank you
So
very
that's all I
much.
wanted to say. Thank you, future president, right here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So take one more from the audience. We've got a hand over there. But I'd like to correct something you said, or I'd like to make a negotiated adjustment to something you said. You said you wanted his job. I think maybe you weren't here when I read his CV. He actually has jobs with an S. So just filling one position won't be enough. He is so multi-talented and multi-leveraged. I think maybe you can start by being his student, mentee, so I can guide you through the process of how he's been effective all over the world. So the president is just one phase of the great personality of the honored individual we find over there. Please. And I'll take one more from here, and then we'll let, well, it's not so much we'll let. I mean, y'all are grown-ups. You go for lunch. You march on your feet, even if I didn't let you go. But, you know, so I'm not embarrassed. I would actually let you go, if you get my drift.
So yeah, we have talked a lot about the African diaspora going back to their country after gaining education or experiencing culture abroad. But what I would like to ask is whether those people who are second or third or fourth generation Africans who've never lived in Africa but have only had second-hand experience from stories or information through the internet about Africa, would you rather that they play an active role in portraying or representing Africa, or a more passive role because they have no real-time experience of Africa or the culture?
That's a very brilliant question. I was supposed to do a presentation this morning on something relative to that. I'm part of the Hebrew Israelite community in South Israel. We won't have time to do that. I would possibly later. But we have embarked on what we call a bold spiritual initiative, which we've already got nearly 5,000 Africans from the diaspora since 1967 on the continent of Africa actively participating. We have created the infrastructure to be able to assimilate Africans who've been away from the continent for over 400 years to now come and love being and engaging on the continent with the adjustments in social expectations. I'm a product of the community all the way to my doctorate. So not only have we just come as a social infrastructure, we've also come with all the institutions, academic, political, educational, and we're thriving now from an African platform or elite base. We can talk further on that, but I'm a product of it, and we're engaging with like-minded, proactive individuals, African individuals all over to be able to make those adjustments against the challenges. So it's a conversation we can have, but not for now. You've got to go for lunch. The gentleman over here, and then we would, yeah, and then. And I'd like to thank everyone for being around. Thanks again for bringing the cultural group. That was brilliant in their movement.
Welcome.
But so that they can go for lunch, let's have the last.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to thank the panelists for their views and the presentations. Just to inform you, before my posting to Berlin, I was heading the Diaspora Services Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uganda. If you realize, a number of countries right now, have taken the diaspora so serious and have created either departments or even ministries that are charged with diaspora affairs. My part as a head of the Department of Diaspora was we recognize the role, and we point out 4 things. 1, the remittances they send back to Africa are very important. But the remittances are usually for domestic use. They are sending home for school fees, medical treatment, building a house. To us, we felt that's not enough. So we encourage them now to invest such that they can create jobs, they can services, and pay taxes, and help in developing our country. So we find ways of encouraging them to invest. We have now, like in Uganda, a compendium of businesses and investment opportunities whereby we have made it easier for them, not waste time doing feasibility study to find out where to invest, but show them, If you have 20,000, you can invest in this. If you want to come up as a group, you can do like this. Our embassies are tasked to do such. The third thing is when these people come out of Africa, you know, we have what we call the push and pull factors of why people leave and why they choose to go to a particular place. If there's a factor pushing you this way, there will be another factor pulling you the other side. So when they come to other countries, they end up studying, working, and gaining experience. So that experience, they are able to now bring back the knowledge they have earned as they worked with wherever they lived. Then the fourth one is our ambassadors. The diaspora will always have that thing for his or her country where he came from, and will always defend it as much as possible. That because I know I come from Uganda, if I hear anything to do with Uganda, I will try to. Because in the past, people, when you talk, I'm from Uganda, they'll say, Idi Amin. But no, Idi Amin was in the 70s. Now we are in 2016. So there are things that have gone on. These people will always explain to you what is happening in their countries. Now, the young lady there talked about the generations that have come after. My department, working together with the UNDP, have come up with attracting the second and third generations back home, because their parents have the attachment, because they came from there, they have cousins and brothers they know. But these other kids we give birth to when we're out don't have any attachment. So we are trying to find a way of attracting them through the relevant media that can be of interest to the youth, because youth usually now like using the internet, social media, or whatever. And we, together with the UNDP, we are coming up with something which will be helping in attracting this sport to also think when their parents pass on, because now the parents are old, the other generation should continue to be attracted to look back home as my grandfather was from Africa, my dad was from Africa, I should also maybe get that attachment. Thank you. But so if you realize the role they are playing in the international relations, it's there, I've mentioned it, they are our ambassadors. Then with the rise of Africa, they are investing, and then they are sharing their knowledge, and they will continue to protect us, defend us wherever possible. Thank you very much.
We'd like to thank you very, very much. First, we'd like to thank the ICD, the Director General, who we, again, are very fortunate to have over here, Mark, for what you did nearly 15 years ago from a small basement in Berlin to have this idea, and now it's bloomed into being able to see people have the hope and the exchange of the minds who've been there and the minds. Again, remember that he was also once one of the young leaders, but with the tenacity, today we have an institution that is making others share in the dream. We'd also like to thank all our panelists. Again, the former president of Romania, Dr. Emil Constantinescu. I get it. You know, we'd like to thank, let's give him a big round of applause. To our program director, Florence Tatu, Amimu, let's give her a big round of applause. And to two of our students, putting them right on the scene, you know, and we just keep making them have to, you know, bring up their potential. First, to Nermin, excellent presentation. Let's give her a wonderful round of applause. And to Phiöip Eyam-Ozung, let's give him an extra round of applause. And I must say we're about 6 minutes past the time that we were supposed to break. I must just break the stereotype that we don't have African time. That's changed. I just gave you some social flexibility within the first 2 days so you could be comfortable. But again, in the Rise of Africa, we'll be staying very strict to our times. So if I have to truncate and cut a certain liberalness around, just understand it's because Africa is rising and things have to be done with the tightness and the precision of time. Please enjoy your lunch. Let's give the participants a big round of applause. We're going to go for a lovely lunch break, and at 2:30, not 2:45, not 2:50, we'll engage on the next rising impact of this conference, the Rise of Africa 2016. Thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you then.